on the multilingual cafe there. I saw his.
Hello,
Yes, Salvi. We are live.
Yes, can we go?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So good morning, everyone here in Brazil, and of course, good afternoon to Paola in Italy, and also to our friends who might be in Europe now. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to have this session, the first in June. And our special guest today is Professor Paola Vettorel. And it's such a great pleasure. And the first thing we have to say is thank you, Paola. Grazie mille for being with us.
Obrigada, and thank you.
So then, first of all, as we always do, I'm going to introduce our ILF scholar. And then I'll pass on to Paola the floor for her to explore the text that we in the group read beforehand. So then, Paola, I hope the information I have here is updated. But then, if something is outdated, you can correct me, please. So Dr. Paola Vettorel is Assistant Professor of English and Linguistics in the Department of Foreign Languages and Literatures at the Università di Verona, Italy, working in the areas, especially pragmatics, sociolinguistics, and discourse analysis. So her main research interests include ILF and its implications in ELT, so English as a lingua franca and global Englishes, implications of ILF and global Englishes in ELT, as I said, including language awareness, communicative competence, communication strategies, and she's going to explore this topic specifically today. Intercultural communicative competence, teacher education, ELT materials. Paola also works with BELF, which is Business English as a Foreign Language, as a Lingua Franca, including communication strategies, pedagogical implications, representations of culture and civilization in ELT textbooks, ILF and intercultural communicative competence, English in Italian advertising and in the linguistic landscape, the presence of English in young people's lives in the media and the linguistic landscape. Paola is a teacher trainer in several courses, has coordinated several teacher education courses in Italy, and has been involved in different projects, especially in teacher education. Of course, about the publications, Paola has published extensively, and I'm going to list just a few of them, like English in 2014, English as a lingua franca in wider networking, blogging practices, and it was published by Mouton de Grutier, and she received an honorable mention, Book Prize 2016. She edited New Frontiers in Teaching and Learning English through Cambridge Scholars. Also in 2016, World Englishes and ILF Informed Classroom Practices Proposals from a Pre-Service Teacher Education Program in Italy that was published in JELF, Journal of English as a Lingua Franca. Also, with Battisti, Fiorato, and Ricchieri, she edited Teacher Education, English Language, Literature, and Culture in Italy. Together with Alessia Kogo, they edited Negotiating Meaning in Business English as a Lingua Franca. With Lucilla Lopriori, our dear Lucilla, she co-authored the chapter Perspectives in World Englishes and ILF-Informed ELT Materials in Teacher Education in this volume that I have here. And I had the pleasure of also participating as Kurt Kohn and some other colleagues. And also in the Bloomsbury World Englishes So the volume of, that was published in 2021, she authored the chapter, sorry, World English as a Lingua Franca and ELT Materials, a Critical Perspective. And the volumes were edited, in this case, the pedagogical one, by Yasemin Bayurt and Mario Saraceni. And of course, the text that Paola will explore and we received to explore beforehand is communication. It was published in 2017 in a volume for Acorda Letras. That is the journal at Universidade Estadual de Feira de Santana, sorry. And I had the pleasure of editing this volume with Poliana Rocha, my colleague from UNEB and PhD advisee, and Luis Guerra from Évora University. So it's called Communication Strategies, ELF and ELT Materials. So this was published in 2017. And of course, last but not least, I'd like to say that Paola is in Verona, this beautiful city in Italy that is famous for the most famous Shakespearean couple, Romeo and Juliet. So welcome, Paola, to our meeting of the ILF Brasil research group. Thank you very much for accepting this invitation. We are very honored, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Savio, both for inviting me and for your very kind presentation. And thank you, everybody, for being here today to discuss as a group what I will present. So I'll start sharing the screen and compare when, if we compare what I will explore today with the article you read, I have added some more examples in this presentation. And as I said earlier on, please stop me if it's too long, because as I said, I have added some examples. So today we will start from looking at the concepts of communicative competence and strategic competence in particular, also problematizing it in a way when thinking about global Englishes and ELF. We will then look more specifically at communication strategies, the importance they have. We will provide a definition, and then we will look at the importance they have in ELF as a fundamental part of the communication processes in English as a lingua franca, including also multilingualism and plurilingual repertoires. And in this case, we will have examples both from the voice corpus and the BMELF corpus, but also from digital communication, a couple of examples from my research in blogs. Then we will see how, all this and the relevance communication strategies have in ELF, whether and how they are reflected in ELT materials, to then draw some conclusions. So traditionally, the components of communicative competence, the main components are three: the grammatical and the linguistic one, the social-linguistic and discourse one, and the strategic one. Where in the conceptualization of communicative competence that was started to be created late 70s, beginning of the 80s. And, as far as grammatical linguistic competence is concerned, of course, we had the knowledge of lexical items, morphology, syntax, sentence, grammar, semantics, and phonology. The big, so to say, revolution was the fact that sociolinguistic competence was included as part of communicative competence too, in line and following Himes' studies, and this refers to the knowledge of sociocultural rules. Then a further element was added to this component, which is related to discourse rules in particular cohesion and coherence. And then strategic competence, that is to say, or at least as it was defined in the very early studies, as the knowledge of how to cope with or to solve problems that may arise in communication, mainly verbal, but they could also be non-verbal. So communicative competence is made up in the traditional definition of linguistic, sociolinguistic, discourse, and strategic competence. Strategic, the competence that we are more interested in today is the strategic competence, which includes communication strategies. And research in this area developed since the 80s, at the beginning or in traditional terms, within a deficit perspective. That is to say, strategic competence was to be applied by non-native speakers when interacting with native speakers to solve potential problems in communication. Taroni was the first scholar to introduce an interactional view of strategic competence. That is to say, rather than a deficit perspective, non-native speakers not having an adequate knowledge of the language, so having to resort to communication strategies in order to communicate, rather than this, an interactional view, where communication is viewed as a joint, a social co-construction of meaning, and where communication strategies are used to enhance the effectiveness of communication. And this is, of course, the view that is also embraced by ILF scholars. It is important to point out that this traditional, so to say, view of communicative competence and also strategic competence has some critical points when setting it against an ILF perspective. That is to say, it's still based on an idea in a circle native speaker model within a monolingual perspective, so where plurilingual repertoires are not seen as part of strategic competence, and where, as Widdowson points out, the different components, linguistic, sociolinguistic, discourse, and strategic, are seen as separate rather than as a whole in contributing to the effectiveness of communication. A few things about English as lingua franca. I mean, you're all familiar with these things, but just to remind us of the background. Zailofa's definition: English as lingua franca is any use of English among speakers of different first languages for whom English is the communicative medium of choice, and often the only option, since it is even in the expanding circle, so to say, taught and learned as a compulsory subject in school. It hence involves communication in international context amongst people of different lingua cultural backgrounds. This is a fundamental thing, where the primary aim is achieving mutual intelligibility and effective communication, and where ILF users do not simply adopt English, but adapt it to suit their communicative purposes. So it is something that is different from the English of native speakers, and where users exploit the resources of the language to achieve their communicative outcomes rather than aiming at native-like competence. So when we think about communicative competence, and word English is more specifically ILF, we have some issues. How do we define communicative competence, given the plurality of Englishes in terms of word Englishes, but specifically of ILF, where we have, as you know, different lingua cultural backgrounds. And I have a few quotes here from different scholars who point at this problematicity, in the sense that Savignon, referring to word English variety, she points out that they have distinctive linguistic, social linguistic, and communicative features, where intelligibility depends not on the aping of native speaker linguistic and social linguistic patterns, but on the negotiation of meaning. And the same goes with Widdowson, who adds a further aspect referring to communicative functions, saying that they're culture specific in the same way as linguistic forms are language specific. So what we call a complaint or a promise does not necessarily correspond with categories of communication function in another culture. So he says, Widdowson says, asking for a drink in Subanum in the Pacific Islands is not the same thing as asking for a drink in Britain. And we could say asking for a drink in Spain is not the same as asking for a drink in Brazil. But what is appropriate in Indian English may not be so in the USA. And Savignon, again, communicative competence cannot be defined solely in terms of social linguistic norms of a particular speech community, because several L2 cultures may exist, each with a different set of rules. And more importantly, L2 may be widely used as a means of communication amongst non-native speakers. And this, of course, is the case of ELF. So, you know, keeping in mind that, you know, the concept of native speaker itself has been highly problematic, not only in ELF, but also in recent studies. So there is no such person as an ideal speaker or hearer of the language. Whether this applies to any language. And where strategic competence includes the ability to adapt one's communicative strategies to a variety of changing and often unexpected interpersonal conditions. So strategic competence cannot be referred in terms of social linguistic competence, so to say, to a specific ideal native speaker, particularly in terms of ELF, and it helps to adapt to a variety of situations where rephrasing, repetition, emphasis, seeking clarification, circumlocution, avoidance, and even message modification are used to meet the demands of ongoing communication. They are an essential part of ongoing communication, whether in your own first language or first languages, or in an additional language. And this requires or implies the ability to take the perspective of the other participant. So it is an essential property of effective communicators, where communication is a two-sided thing. It is the speaker's job, but also the listener's job. And in this process, communication strategies and strategic competence are absolutely essential. So we can say that strategic competence and communication strategies are a sort of underlying competence, an ever-present potentially usable inventory of skills that allows a strategically competent speaker to negotiate messages and resolve problems, or to compensate for deficiencies in any of the other competencies. And, you know, the resolve problems and compensate for deficiencies, you know, goes within the deficit perspective that I mentioned. And Taronin, in a more recent work, asks that the essential ability to creatively and flexibly draw upon a range of different language forms and expressions in order to reach a communicative goal, to engage in a divergent and open-ended communicative process where there are many possible solutions. Communication is not something that is fixed that has to rely only rely on native speaker norms. It is something that is co-constructed in interaction. And to give you an idea of the communication strategies that are involved in this ongoing process of communication, I have reproduced Celsi, Mercier, Journey, and Farrell's list here. Apart from avoidance or reduction strategies, which we are not looking, we are not looking at because it means message abandonment. We're not interested in, or topic avoidance. We're not interested in that. We're interested in seeing how communication is reached through communication strategies. So achievement of compensatory strategies. You have a list there, to have an idea of how many tools speakers have at their disposal in the process of co-constructing communication. And I have added some examples here you may be familiar with, but just to remind us of what may be involved in the different types of communication strategies. For example, and I'm following Cook here, 2008. For example, for paraphrase, approximation or generalization, animal for horse, substitution, V for weather, description, the thing you cook watering, so describing something, or when you make a container, to refer to pottery, or exemplification, cars for transport, restructuring, so reformulating your message to make it clear, word coinage, airbow for balloon, and we have in this case creativity, the creativity part of ILF that has been is such an important part in ILF, or appeal for assistance, asking some of your partners or interlocutors in the conversation, asking for help. What's this? How do you call this in English? Or simply, sorry, what? Comprehension checks. Both, this is important, both on the side of the speaker. Can you follow me? Is it clear? Am I clear? So checking that your interlocutors are following you, but also on the side of the hearer. Did you say this? Do you mean that? Can you repeat, please? So once again, communication strategies help in co-constructing meaning and making sure that the conversation is going on smoothly, both on the side of the hearer and of the speaker. Notice the transfer definition in second language acquisition is set within a deficit perspective. So transferring from the L1, in ELF terms, we would rather use the word multilingual repertoires. So for example, translation from the L1 or resorting to the L1 in code switching or translanguage elements. Make the door shut from German, but for people who are familiar with ELF, there are hundreds of examples of simple of this. And then, of course, also non-verbal strategies, for example, miming. And this is, for example, evident in the VMELF corpus, which is the first video recorded corpus of English as lingua franca, where conversations were recorded on Skype. So you also have these non-verbal elements available, which are not in other corpora, for example. So rather than the traditional deficit perspective, a systematic technique employed by a speaker to express his meaning when faced with some difficulty, Oda, or Bialystok, all attempts to manipulate a limited linguistic system, so non-native, native, or learner, permanent learner perspective, or Ferk and Casper, potentially conscious plans for solving what to an individual presents itself as a problem in reaching a particular communicative goal. So to overcome problems learners face, so deficit non-native learner perspective, in ELF we have an interactional view where there's communication strategies are seen as a mutual attempt of two or more, of course, interlocutors to agree on meaning in situations where requisite meaning structures, linguistic and social linguistic, do not seem to be shared. Remember the different lingua cultural backgrounds. So it may well be the case that some elements, particularly cultural concepts, but not only, are not shared. Or, Caroni again, communication strategies as part of social interaction seen as tools joined in a joint negotiation of meaning in situations where both interlocutors are attempting to agree as to a communicative goal. So both hearer, both speaker and hearer involved in a joint negotiation. And Savignon, 1997, communication strategies include the ability to adapt one's communication strategies to a variety of changing and often unexpected in-person conditions to meet the demands of ongoing communication, what I referred to earlier on. Okay, so far, if you have questions, just or comments, just stop me. But when I start talking, then I go on. So in ELF, communication strategies in English as a lingua franca are a vital and fundamental tool to reach effective communication because of the diversity of the lingua cultures involved, but also because of the hybridity and fluidity both of settings and of use. So in ELF, mutual understanding cannot be taken for granted because of these of the context and of the diversity and hybridity of contexts and users. So it has to be mutual understanding, has to be an interactional achievement to build a common ground, where active listening involving both the speaker and the listener is fundamental, and where the degree of mutual cooperation has to be high, where a variety of communication strategies are used to promote understanding and accommodation. Not only the achievement strategies we briefly saw earlier on, but also, for example, back channeling. What? So not only full communication strategies, but also back channeling, and of course also utterance completion. Where, and it is important to point this out, understanding is to be seen as a continuum, not as either non-understanding or full understanding, but this is, always in communication, no matter which language you're using to communicate. So understanding has to be seen along a continuum where if there are occurrences or instances of non-understanding, generally they are signaled through various means to show awareness of a problematic point, and where generally, apart from some more specific contexts like migration, where there are also power relationships, so there non-understandings or misunderstandings may be more frequent for a number of reasons, and in Italy, Maria Grazia Guido and her team have worked a lot on that. But generally, both in ELF and in BELF, the frequency of non-understanding has been shown by research to be low. And indeed, given their relevance, communication strategies and pragmatic moves has been a largely investigated area in ELF, mostly in academia and BELF, business, English as lingua franca. Of course, business business is money. So communicating effectively in business English as a lingua franca is fundamental. So the role of communication strategies has been shown to be even more important. And they have been shown to be communication strategies widely used both as preemptive, so before a problem may arise or to make sure it does not arise, and also retroactive, so solving a problem. They have been shown to be an integral part of the construction of meaning towards mutual understanding, but also serving the creation of rapport, so at a more human or personal level, to enhance accommodation, and in some cases also to enhance shared non-nativeness. So what Alessia Kogo has termed as we are all on the same boat. They're used to ensure and enhance explicitness, but also cooperativeness within, what we have just said. This particularly in ELF, but we should also remember, as Widdowson reminds us or points out, that communication strategies are in general part of normal pragmatic practice. We use them every day. We use them in interaction towards reaching mutual understanding. Of course, being ELF, involving ELF, a different set of lingua cultures, they are even more relevant, but they are part of normal pragmatic practice in general. And, as Ilofer and Widdowson say, it may turn out that what is distinctive about ELF lies in the communicative strategies its speakers use and the way in which they use them. This is, a sort of overview of the types of communication strategies that have been researched in ELF and that have been found to be used. And also the different definitions that have been used for communication strategies. They can be self-initiated or other-initiated. For example, it can be the speaker that says, are you with me? Do you understand? So self-initiating the process of the use of communication strategies, or other listener initiated. Can you repeat, please? What did you say? What? Sorry, and so on and so forth. There can be preemptive, or they have also been defined as proactive moves used to prevent possible non-understanding. For example, partial repetition. If you see that your interlocutors, are not with you, they possibly through a back channel, for example, they show that they're not following. You can repeat what you're saying, paraphrase it, reformulate it, so preventing possible problems. But they can also be, and above all, retroactive. So, excuse me, when a problem is signaled, then the speaker can repeat, also providing input that is redundant and making the message more explicit. The same with reformulation, rephrasing, clarification, repair, so reformulating, restructuring what one is saying, explaining, paraphrasing, using circumlocution, but also using confirmation and clarification practices. For example, not only, particularly on the side of the listener, but not only, through requests, minimum queries, what? Sorry, repetition in a rising intonation. The book is here. Confirmation checks, very minimal, yeah? Do you mean? Several types of comprehension checks, and also, of course, back channeling, as I have already said. Last thing pointed out by Mauronen and her the Alpha group working on academic discourse, very often in academic discourse, also meta discourse markers are used. For example, the last thing I'm going to look at, or the first thing you said is that, you know, I mean, so marking marking the way in which for example, an academic talk is structured, but this is typical above all of academic speech. A few examples. The first example here is from a study I carried out on the voice subcorpus, and I wanted to focus on the leisure subcorpus, that is to say, conversations that are casual, so neither business nor academic nor organizational and so on and so forth. And I focus particularly on conversations, 21 conversations for about 68,000 words, and also interviews, the 5 interviews part of the voice corpus. And what I looked at specifically is the way in which, as for repetition or clarification, is enacted through minimal queries, so through keywords. Again, sorry, pardon, excuse me, what? Which, you know, if you think about normal pragmatic practice, is what we usually do, rather than, you know, using a full sentence. Can you repeat, please, what you have said? I've not understood. Usually also not to interrupt the flow of the conversation, minimal queries are used. And as you can see, the occurrences, you know, sorry, and what above all is high. And this is one example. We have here 2 speakers, S4 and S4 and S5. And S4, you know, maybe I need some food. Some what? So, food. Yes, stuff you eat. Food. Exactly. As you can see, it's not the somewhat is very quick. It's not disruptive. The first speaker repeats, first strategy repeats the word, but then provides a paraphrase of food until the comprehension is reached. Other examples, similar examples, always from the leisure voice corpus. Again, 2 speakers. Did she find a flat there easily? Sorry. Did she find a place to live? Oh, yes, she lived in a flat. So comprehension reached. Once again, minimal query and paraphrase or definition of the word that was not understood. Similar in the following example, S2, S1, and S4. Why did you pick Vienna? What? Sorry. Why did you come to Vienna? Because the university and so on and so forth. Once again, not disruptive, immediately solved, so to say, and mutual understanding reached, and you can see it here in the because reply. Other examples, this is from Coppa, and this is an example of the fact that the use of repetition and reformulation, mother tongue, did not help in reaching mutual understanding. So S1, S2, and S1. What's your first language in China? What's your first language? The first language? Your mother tongue. First language? First language, mother tongue. You can see that they, the 2 speakers, I mean, S1 signals twice that she does not understand. The only communication strategy S2 finds is a reformulation, so mother tongue rather than first language, but they do not manage to resolve this communication. An example here from, sorry, from Kogo and Pizzo. And this refers to a business context. And this is an example of a word that is reformulated, but using a specific jargon, which is part of the lingua culture of the participant, S4 and S2. So now, yeah, if I make a comment there, the impulse channel, and we have a signal of normal understanding, the impulse channel or the CVS channel, and in this case, referring to the specificity of the context the two speakers share resolves the problem. Another example, three synonyms or two synonyms better used in this case with a overt checking of understanding. So in this case, we have, it's adapted from Kaur in Kogo and Pizzo, we have V and S as participants. And V says, wherever the target groups are located is no longer, distance is no longer a barrier. Yeah, distance is no longer an impediment. Yes, no longer an obstruction. You understand? Because no matter where you are, you get the information. In this case, we have back channeling here. Yeah, yes, signaling of understanding, but nevertheless, to make sure the concept is shared and carried across, B uses impediment and obstruction, and then openly asks for a comprehension, openly uses a comprehension set. What I would like you to notice in these examples is also the way in which these different communication strategies are an integral part of the conversation. They are not disruptive. They are fully part of the process, of the communicative process of ongoing communication that is taking place. A very interesting case in the use of communication strategies is when we have participants discussing about cultural concepts. What do I mean by cultural concepts? By cultural concepts, I mean concepts that are specifically related to either a lingua culture, in this case, for example, German, but can also be Austrian with Plätzchen. I think in Austrian they make them too, but certainly in German, where also the term, the word used belongs to the language connected to that cultural concept, which may not be shared or are very likely not to be shared by the other participants. In this case, Plätzchen, the example comes from the V-mouth corpus, and it has been analyzed both by Stefan Diemer, who's one of the creators of the corpus, together with Marie-Louise Brunner, and also by Monica Antonello in her doctoral dissertation. And you see they're talking about Christmas. Christmas, any different in Germany? I can tell you, shakes head and shrugs. This, as you can see, indicates the non-verbal language of the speakers involved, because the V-mouth corpus was video, the conversations were video recorded, so we also had the video available. So I can tell you, is there something special? I think what is special about Christmas, bake these cookies. I don't know if you do that. Plätzchen. I don't know, in German, we don't, you have Dau, pronounced as Duff, and there you have figures, and you just make some stars or Christmas trees out of the Dau. Ah, right. I think that people do that also in England, right? Okay. So this Plätzchen, typical of the German Christmas tradition, at least in some areas of Germany, what, you know, apart from back channels signaling that the speaker is, the listener is following the conversation, as you can see, we have a reformulation, tentative one with Dau, and then adding details, you have figures, and then adding to the explanation, you make some stars and Christmas trees. Together with multilingual resources. In this case, as with Dima and Brunner, le mot juste, Plätzchen, can only be explained, it cannot be translated. So communication strategies are fundamental, particularly when dealing with culture. The same, this also from Antonello's dissertation, and in this case, the example is from the boys' leisure corpus. We have the mélange. Mélange is a type of coffee which apparently has this name not everywhere, but only they're based in Austria, so possibly only in Austria. So, you know, they reformulate, explaining what mélange is. It's milk with coffee, milk, and it's cappuccino. Oh, but it sounds a mélange. This sounds is a typical Austrian. So repeating the context, explaining how they do it, saying that it's similar to cappuccino, but a bit different because the froth is less. So repetition and reformulation. And then using their multi or plurilingual resources, the multilingual resources in their repertoires. There's a café latte, café au lait. So trying with another language, which is part of their repertoire, to further explain the concept. And this is evident also in this example. And I think this example, always from the boys' leisure subcorpus, I think it's interesting because we have a concept, poutine, that is Canadian. So it belongs to one of the native countries belonging or deriving from the first diaspora. So here we have a series of speakers from different lingua cultures, including S5 and S3, who are Canadian. You know, they're talking about food because many of these leisure conversations deal either with food or drink or free time. S5, Canadian, says, I didn't really think you were eating poutine. And S3, who is Canadian, corrects him, poutine. So poutine is made of fries, cheese curds, and gravy. Do you know what cheese curd? So one of the Canadian interlocutors, participants in the conversation, imagines that the other speakers may not be familiar with cheese curds, which is a special kind of fresh cheese that is part of this dish, poutine. But then S4 says, I don't know what gravy is. Cheese curd? You don't know what gravy is? And they start a conversation which is where really the way in which meaning is co-constructed by different participants emerges. It's quite clear. So it's animal, it's when you bake meat, there's a fluid coming out, the meat, okay, this is going to be a very gross story. And then the conversation goes on, and another speaker says, you know what they speak about? So possibly S4 realizes that S3 doesn't have a clue what they're talking about. No, not at all. So S2 intervenes again, saying, you don't know what gravy is? It's fat, flour, and water. So they go on with explaining what it is, source, what, animal fat, until we have S1, whose first language is Norwegian. We call it C, Norwegian. So you make the same thing. Yeah, of course. Does it look the same? And so on and so forth. So I think this example is really representative of how how important communication strategies and the interaction in the way in which meaning is co-constructed by different speakers, also using plurilingual resources, in this case possibly to make sense of this concept of gravy, but naturally using another resource is there. Okay, all questions?
Paola, we will wait until you finish, so then we can have questions or comments, okay?
Because I can see there is a message in the chat, but I'm not opening the chat now.
No, don't worry. I am the one who said ask people to prepare comments or questions. Don't
okay. Okay, thank you. So, cultural concepts, les mots justes, mélange, café au lait, si. Of course, the use of languages of which the speaker may know only very little, for example, café au lait or mélange, has become part of ELF within a multilingual turn and a super diversity perspective in the way in which our societies have become more and more multilingual. And of course, in ELF, it is integral part of co-constructing mutual understanding. So it can also be used as it can also be seen as a communication strategies, and it involves the exploitation of all the linguistic resources at the speaker's disposal to fulfill a variety of different communicative functions. It can be used to include or exclude speakers, meaning negotiation, which is what we have just seen, but also through towards the construction of personal identity through the use of the L1, so rapport and in-group, but also interpersonal relations. And of course, the use of these bio multilingual repertoires are not to be seen as transfer or as a problem, but as part of a user's identity in communication. And besides being used as communication strategies, very often in the use of these multilingual repertoires, we can see a certain degree of language awareness that is shown by the interlocutors. And you have an example here from the voice corpus, where they are discussing, the word raspberry. So as one says, yeah, the only thing we have to buy here will be Tabasco, but raspberry juice? Raspberry, that's the word I was looking for. raspberry. Yeah, Himbeeren, she said. Himbeeren. Yeah. Frambuesa. In Dutch, framboos. Oh, laughing. Raspberry. Yeah, raspberry. So, you know, first of all, raspberry juice, and as Stein said, that's the word I was looking for, he couldn't remember, but then almost a playful use of the different language repertoires of the different languages in the speaker's repertoire, which are shared, and then you can see, oh, so this laugh showing this acceptance, and not only acceptance, acknowledgement of the fact that different languages are, in this case, used to further clarify the concept. This is just one example, but there are many in all across both voice and also the email. So a conscious exploitation of the language. This is what I mean by language awareness. And the use of different strategies and different repertoire, different language repertoires, I noticed also in my research on personal blogs. So I researched 15 personal journals from bloggers in different areas of Italy on live journal who, excuse me, who communicated with speakers of different lingual cultural backgrounds all across, all over the world. So, you know, also in computer-mediated communication, where the use of ELF is even greater than in face-to-face conversations, and certainly it has accelerated the spread of English, and where English as a lingua franca is used to communicate beyond any territorial boundaries and beyond any speech community borders, I noticed exactly the same processes. And I have 3 examples here of these strategies used to share culture and meaning co-construction. For example, in this case, the blogger talked about a place she went to in the previous Friday. Friday night, I went with some university friends to Recco, a little town near Genoa, to see a fireworks show for the Sagra del Fuoco. I have found a little article about the event in English here. It was the first time I saw a show so good. So, explaining, of course, blogs are written, so interaction takes place with the comments. So in this case, it's a sort of preemptive strategy, explaining where Recco is, a little town near Genoa. And then the show, Sagra del Fuoco, she probably realized that the name may not say anything about what is happening in this Sagra del Fuoco. So what she does, again, preemptively, is provide a link with an article in English in addition, so to provide some more information as a strategy for her readers to understand what she's talking about. Or another example in this case of the use of a language other than English in the repertoire, in this case, to refer to her Italian readers. Because it's another blogger, another post, and she says, because you see, I gave him a run, uno squillo, donnine belle. And then she explains what a squillo is. It's a common practice in Italy when you need to tell something and you don't have the money, you make the other person's cell phone ring only once It can mean yes, or I received your message, or another 100 things depending on the context. So Donnine Belle, my dear ladies, she is directly referring to her Italian friends reading the blog, and then she explains what she means by it's not a ring, it should be a ring, but it's well understandable. And this, of course, was pre-WhatsApp, ages, so about 10 years ago. The last example, it's communication strategies, always from a blog, and you have B indicating the blogger and C indicating the comments, where the blogger says you must see Avatar. It's amazing. It has action, romance, morale. I hope that's the right word. So asking for help. And it's very funny and interesting. And a commenter says, morals, I believe. Morale is good spirits and morals are right versus wrong. And you can see the interaction even in the written space of blogs. Yeah, that's morals. And again, you know, laughing, a way of saying thank you, and then it goes on. It is very creative. I'm going to watch for the third time tonight, and so on. So, to sum up, communication strategies have a fundamental role in health. They are part of the collaborative co-construction of meaning. They can both prevent but also resolve possible communication breakdowns, and they are a fundamental tool to build common ground for understanding communication. In this sense, they are part of what Widdowson and Zailofa call the strategic capability or lingual capability in and towards effective communication and lingual capability. In meaning co-construction, in, for, and with different lingua cultures, they are part of the natural exploitation of language and languages as a tool of adaptable resources, both for communicative but also self-expressive aims, drawing both from intralingual, so English, and interlingual, so translingual practices within, you know, the multilingual Franca perspective. Now, moving to the implications of this, given this importance communication strategies have in health, they should be integral part of course books. We should educate, because I don't like the word train, educate our students to see the function of communication strategies in general, also in their L1, and the importance they have for effective communication. And I'm sharing with you some findings from a research study that is, you know, in the article it's not Accord das Letters, it's Ahor das Letras. The article, you know, Savio shared, where basically I looked whether communication strategies were included and what kind of activities and tasks were presented. And the communication strategies I looked for are, you can find them here: appeal for help, negotiation, both in terms of request for repetition and clarification, so the listener side, but also confirmation checks, direct, indirect questions, and so on. Responsive, so repetition, rephrasing, expansion. We've seen, you know, in the examples how important they are. And then, of course, achievement strategies in terms of circumlocution, paraphrase, and so on and so forth. Overall, they are not consistently dealt with, apart from two cases. They are separate from language in use, so to say, so very often presented as exam strategies, so not as part of normal communicative practice. practice. There are some positive examples that could, of course, be seen as a starting point to improve them. And you have, the instances I found there as you read in the some examples. And this example, Appeal for Help, is from one of the course books that dealt most consistently with communication strategies. It had a special section of communication strategies, as you can see here, as part of learner training, as it was called. And it started, from a reflection of the students, work in pairs. Suppose we were talking to an English friend, it goes back to 1996. Possibly now, in ELF terms, it would be in English with a friend. In the following situations, what would you do? What would you say? You haven't understood what he or she has just said. You can't follow her or him because she's talking too fast, and so on and so forth. So reflection, awareness raising. Then expressions. Are you with me? If you can see what I mean, what did you say? What did you say? So examples, and then practice. What would you say in the following situation? You haven't understood the past in italics. So, language in practice. And then again, think it's 1996. So the examples here in the figures, work in pairs, look at the signs, student A turns to page 149, so information gap, and the two students have a similar set of examples which are native because it's 1996, but we could have similar examples, from the linguistic landscape also in other contexts now. So reflection, examples, and practice, focusing on getting help from the speaker. Active listening, not only the listener's job, but also not only the speaker's job, but also the listener's. Another example, request for clarification and repetition. In this case, we have quite well represented area, but very often only formulaic language. No examples of what, sorry. Again, we saw in the voice examples how frequent they are, and very little opportunity for practice, and only one example of a multilingual situation, which is this at a restaurant with Turkish, and hors d'oeuvre, it means starter. One example, and as you can see, sort of stereotypical. Circumlocution, most well represented area in the data, also description, synonyms, approximation, but again, very often only in connection to exam strategies. For example, now for Trinity, when you speak with the examiner and you can't find the right word, you could use expressions like, it's one of those things you use to cut bread. It's where you use it under dinner plates and so on and so forth. But why only exams? Communication strategies are part of normal pragmatic practices. Another example from, the book we saw earlier on, and in this case, adjusting the message using approximations. And in this case, what is interesting is also that we have reference to concepts that are cultural concepts. Most of them. For example, work in pairs. Suppose you were talking again to an English friend in the following situations. What would you do to make yourself understood? Compare your answers in small groups. So awareness raising. You don't have the English word for comodino. Comodino is bedside table. So quite general. Medico di famiglia. CPR, I think, or GR, I think it's called, the doctor who NHS doctor who assists people from the public sector, or Ferragosto. Ferragosto is a big thing in Italy on the 15th of August, and you know, it's the last holiday before going back to work after the summer. So, you know, first, what would you do? So reflection in groups. And then once again, in this case, we also have a listening exercise, examples, and then a series of concepts, and then also pictures to be explained. So practicing, actively practicing communication strategies in describing things, in this case, connected, in many cases, connected to the local. And then, you know, it goes on again with providing hints for words that can be used effectively. And in this case, what is interesting is that in the teacher's guide, in the teacher's book, we read that it is an introductory activity that should help make students aware that it is possible, desirable to take an active part in conversation, even when it is difficult to follow what the other person is saying. Strategies to get help from the speaker include not just asking for help directly, but also checking that one has understood and checking that the other person has understood. At the start of the lesson, it is important that students should pool their resources, what we saw, you know, here. So even back in 1996, setting communication strategies at the core of communication, also highlighting these aspects to teachers, which, you know, is about the only example I found. Interestingly, don't worry about making mistakes, first mentioned in 5 course books, sometimes with brief suggestions given, and you can see them here. And you know, these positive examples can certainly be seen as a starting point to develop communication strategies and to see them as part of normal communicative practice within a cooperative meaning making, and also to take risks in communication rather than abandoning a message because you can't find the word, because you are not sure your interlocutor or interlocutors understand you. Taking risks. So trying to explain, to reformulate, to ask for repetition and so on. So, you know, including the development of communication strategies, both in teaching materials and practices, is very important, both in raising the teachers and the learners' awareness of the nature, relevance, and communicative potential they have in any language, and to ensure intelligibility and effective communication, particularly in English as a lingua franca. Providing examples of effective use of communication strategies, like, you know, from the corpora, the examples we saw, and so starting from noticing, raising awareness, but then also providing opportunities to practice them beyond the course book. Encouraging students to be willing to take risks and use them within a more general framework that strategic competence is part of communicative and lingual capability, which is much more important than aping the native speaker. And, you know, yeah, just I would like to conclude with a list of possible reflection activities or materials that could be used. And, you know, very simple, like taboo game for paraphrase, the examples in the course book we saw, but also international school partnerships, for example, are a great way to practice not only English as lingua franca, but also these communication strategies in actual. Sorry if I have been a little bit long.
No problem, Paola. Thank you very much. We could be here listening to you for hours because there is so much to explore here. And the good thing about this is that you, in fact, bring what the regular teacher normally wishes is, how do I apply this to class? How do I see this in my classroom practice, right? So thank you very much. And I know that you have been involved in teacher education. So then I don't know if we have people here in the room who have questions and comments, but I'm going to, I don't usually like to do the talking. I prefer other colleagues to do the talking, but I took notes. Of course, I like this text a lot, and I'm going to explore with you a little bit. We have half an hour. So of course, I'd like to hear from your experience in Italy, and also how, because for example, of course, communication and communication strategies and communicative competence have been, here for so long. And when you mentioned Tehran, and of course, we who are involved or have been involved with teacher education and teaching, we are very aware of such issues and how important is to bring to class, what is done in the real world. So let's say, and then my reflection that I'd like you to make a comment on is, when you, of course, the discussion you brought and also the theoretical background is in many ways, even though you dialogue with authors that elaborated on, communicative competence like Savignon and Tehran and etc. So out of your experience, how much are teachers you've been working with, how much are they receptive to all these issues, especially when it comes to, for example, because communication strategies are inherent to communication in general. And we can say that in EFL practice, so they're there. Maybe they're not explored as they should. And then maybe one important contribution from ELF studies is to bring to light, the importance of really implementing and talking about communication strategies. So what can you tell us about your experience with teachers in teacher education programs in Italy? Are they receptive to all these reflections? Do they feel such reflections and such ideas, and that they are empowering, that they are even they sort of let's say because they carry this burden on their shoulders, so then do they feel that it's it's more liberatory, or if you want to say such a word? But what is the reaction to the regular teacher or regular teacher's reaction to such elaborations? And also, I would like to complement asking you which communication strategies you see. I know that you list a lot of them, and they are inherent to communication strategies in general. Which ones do you see as very, very much ELF oriented that could be implemented, in the classroom? So if you could make a comment on these two issues.
Thank you, Savio. That, core points.
Mm-hmm.
but this is true not only for communication strategies, it's true in my experience also, for example, for intercultural awareness and developing syllabi within an intercultural perspective. First of all, it is fundamental to make teachers aware within teacher education of what we have been talking about. Because very often I see, you mentioned the burden. I see the burden also in terms of their not only professional, but also linguistic past, so to say. You know, they have grown up by experiencing English within education in a certain way. Very often, when you raise awareness, they say, it's true. That's the way it is. It's much more important to, then of course they say, you know, we have exams, so the third person is important, blah, blah. But, you know, if you raise awareness and then ask them to work on some examples, then they also see it's not, you know, as Kurt says, it's integrating it into ELF, integrates into ELT by looking at it from a different perspective. It's not that it's a revolution, of course, but it's not a disruptive thing. It's pointing and including things that maybe have not been highlighted in their importance for communication so much. First thing. I forgot the second thing. Oh, yes. Second thing, teachers who, and at least in Italy, in Europe, this is becoming more and more common. Teachers who have experience of school exchanges, whether virtual one through eTwinning, this big European platform, Erasmus Plus, or actual, you know, school exchanges through Erasmus Plus, are much more open in a way to the inclusion of these aspects than because they see their students communicating. How communication takes place in, you know, beyond, as I like to say, not outside, beyond the classroom. In this case, you know, they're much more open. And I have, you know, some years ago, I coordinating an action research project with primary school children. And, you know, it went back, I think it's 10 years now. Now, working and communicating via Skype or Zoom, it seems normal. At the time, you know, it was a big thing, having these primary school children communicating with the school, with a class in Spain. Children naturally use communication strategies. You know, 10 years old, they talked about their favorite football. Favorite food, school trip to, you know, their places. It's a lot for A1 plus competence. And they use strategies. So, you know, if teachers experience the way in which students actually communicate, then they're more open. And
so then in your experience, you feel that teachers are, you know, in general, more open. They are becoming more aware of all these aspects, and then that potentially has been a transformation in classroom practice, right?
For teachers who are involved in these projects, for example, for a number of reasons, because it's ICT, because they had to cooperate with colleagues, themselves see this, because they see their students communicating. So in this sense, There will be an opening. In general, I'm not sure. I think there's a lot to be done.
Yeah, yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I think we we experience more or less the same landscape here. So the ones who are more involved with teacher education, they are closer to, let's say, to the universities. So then they are becoming, you know, less resistant. But then we still have a long way to go. And finally, if you were to choose, for example, let's say two, so then we won't take time, very ELF sensitive communication strategy that should be, you know, highlighted for our teachers, which ones would you say? Well, this is very ELF, you know, and they should be, you know, highlighted in classroom practice.
Well, certainly the general framework that it's active listening. So speakers and listeners' job. Within this, asking for clarification, saying if you don't understand, so you know that area, and then paraphrase and circumlocution. So being able to explain, also using other languages. Because as we have seen, you know, the melange, but also the poutine and gravy, which
all the examples are great.
You know, the irony, the ironic thing.
Yeah.
So certainly those, but it's more a general frame of mind. It's not a shame if you don't understand.
Sure, yeah.
You know, you should ask, or if you sense that your interlocutors do not understand, ask and reformulate.
Great. Thank you, Paul. I think Jean has a question for you. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you, Savio, and thank you, Paola, for the presentation. Yeah, my question is, I was thinking because, well, since the conceptualization of ELF involves native speakers as well, I was wondering if, do you think native speakers are, I mean, somehow we could consider them as at a disadvantage when it comes to ELF interactions because of lingua culture and like because of multilingualism, you know, a context involved in ELF interactions. And like as the example you used, there were two Canadians there, right? So, and then I was thinking also, if like in the classroom, in order to provide examples of communication strategies in ELF context, but not only in ELF context, if there is like, because usually EFL has this native speaker orientation, I was thinking of if we could even use like native but from different varieties. So for example, an interaction between an Australian and American, for example, or British, because there will be communicative strategies being used based on different cultures, like coming from a different culture. So if you could comment on these things.
Absolutely, and thank you for this question. In this sense, I think that working on BELF, Business English as a Lingua Franca, is very interesting because there is in that area a more open acceptance of the need for active listening and the need to make sure that both speakers are on the same page, okay? And since business is money, also this awareness also involves native speakers. So even though native speakers are more reluctant, so to say, to be part of this negotiation of meaning in BELF, they have to. So there is more evidence of this. And certainly, it would be highly beneficial for all speakers to be aware of these, of how communication unfolds with the use of normal pragmatic practice in terms of communication strategy. And yes, absolutely, this diversity is certainly part also where the English is. Not only, you know, first diaspora varieties, I'm not sure, think about the Putin example, but I'm sure that there would be many words of Maori origin in Australian English that you know, that may not be shared at a world level, but the same goes with Nigerian English or I don't know, Indian English possibly. So yes, absolutely, those examples are would be highly beneficial in terms of education for communication strategies. Yes, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, Daniel. I think you have a couple of comments by Kurt there on the cafe, right? Go ahead.
Yes, he made very interesting comment. I'm going to share with you in a second, Paola. Here it is. Can you see it? This is Kurt saying, "Excellent, dear Paola." Here we have it all in a nutshell: comprehensive and enlightening. And then he says about Jean's questions, he says, native speakers' advantage, it depends on whether you let them.
Yeah.
And Savio comment on that. But before that,
sorry, my comment was on the statement before. Can you project that?
Yeah, I will. Professor Kurt Kahn, he says, I very much liked the little remarks in which you pointed to the roots of English as a lingua franca related strategic competence in speakers' ordinary everyday strategic competence. ILF studies tells us a lot about communication in general. I don't think this kind of communicative awareness has made it into the classroom.
Yeah, I comment. My comment was on, especially on this last part. Can you bring the comment, please, so then Paola can complement?
Oh, your comment? Okay, just a second.
Because he says, I don't think communication strategies or this awareness has made into the classroom. And then I made a comment comparing, for example, multilingual contexts and supposedly monolingual contexts. Can you bring it so then Paola can make a comment?
Yes, just
please.
1 more second. Okay.
As I said, there is a lot to be done yet.
Yeah. Then that's what I say. I particularly agree with your last statement, Kurt. If this is not happening, as he says, this communication awareness is not happening in multilingual contexts. Imagine in many contexts where a monolingual mentality prevails, which we experience this, Paola. So, and then unfortunately, let's say, taking advantage of Jean's comment, so the native, in quotes, of course, the native speaker advantage is in many ways deliberately or not reinforced, you see? Yeah, and then Kurt says there, the communication breaks are in non-native speakers' own minds and hearts. Yeah. So then if you could make a comment or a reflection on this would be great.
Yeah, I agree there is a lot of work to be done in connection to your first question, Savio. You know, the backgrounds of teachers, whether these native competence, grammatical, made mainly of grammatical competence, has accompanied them and still accompanies them. So that's the tune they hear. You know, and this applies also to multilingualism or plurilingualism, English only classrooms, English only classrooms. So, you know, both communication strategies and language awareness applies to these two. And I agree that the communication breaks are in non-native speakers' own minds and hearts.
Yeah.
We did study some years ago, but you know, if you Google, sorry for my English, have a look at the hits you get.
Yes.
Sorry for my English very often goes with, I'm a non-native speaker. So the breaks are there because this is the framework teachers are brought up with, students are brought up with. So it's also what I was saying in encouraging the students to take risks.
Sure.
So, you know, it's all connected. Sorry for my English, I'm not a native speaker.
That's
and then, you know, people answering, your English is perfectly understandable.
That's right.
So we, you know, we have to go a long way, and then certainly Kurt's my English construct can help us a lot.
Yeah.
It involves teachers, it involves students, it involves satisfaction, it involves satisfaction in terms of how your use of English. You know, it's a number of things. Of course, high stakes contests and high stakes exams are a big thing. But I think that if you know, students are encouraged to communicate and say things in another way.
Yeah.
And
especially drawing on what you mentioned, and we keep mentioning there, you know, multilingual resources, their multilingual repertoires. So I think we can open up great avenues for them to trust them, right? Because it seems that this sorry for my English is almost universal, right?
Try and Google it out of curiosity. Hit the hits.
Yeah, and then people think this is only a Brazilian complex. It's not. So
it's not.
it seems that it's almost universal. Sorry for my English, or excuse my bad English, or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, do we have any other comments, Danielle?
No other comments.
Arnon, would you like to say something? I think you mentioned something there, Arnon.
Just a comment. Okay, thank you very much, Professor Paola. I appreciate your speech because you brought something else, because there is some conception in terms of communicative approach that deals with the target language and directs it only to one culture, the culture of the target language. And sometimes students can be limited to think and produce speech only in that direction. And you brought the other possibility that someone can express different in their culture and try to understand the word expressions. If they don't dominate, they try to understand because there are other possibilities offered, and it enhances the dialogue. And so it's very important. It differs very much from that aspect of the linguistic habitus, as we say in Portuguese, habitus linguístico, that you have limited done expressions, done words, just to repeat, just to build up a definite repertoire, linguistic repertoire, and then reproduce it. Okay, and congratulations. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Arnon.
you know, Martin Dewey and Constant Loing have worked a lot on this. There are quite a few articles. So, yes, thank you.
Paola, I was curious. I don't know, maybe Daniel and Arnaud and Jean, even though he's been away from Brazil, I was curious about the un esquilo donine belle. If we have that strategy here, Daniel, have you ever heard of this? For you to give a ring in case you want to say something.
As I said, it's free WhatsApp ties because
yes.
Around the year 2000.
I think if I remember well, like we used to say, like, don't talk, você me liga de volta, something like that, right?
Yeah. So in case you don't have credit, right?
Yes.
Exactly. Exactly. And you know, with parents, usually with parents, back home.
And it was funny because when I worked in Tanzania, the word they used was flash. Like, I'll give you a flash, like so you call me back, like, or I'll flash you. So that was a.
And then the person would know that you should call back.
Yes, to flash is like your phone will just ring, and then I'll switch off, and then you call me back.
So, that's interesting. Give a flash.
Yeah. So we should inquire into the concept of flash or squillo in different cultures, including where the English is, like your
yeah, that's right.
Very interesting.
Great. I think Daniel, I think it's almost time, so then maybe we should close. Paola must be tired.
No, it was a pleasure, really. Thank you.
But anyway, Paola, I would like to thank you very much, really, indeed, for such a wonderful presentation and for sharing your expertise and experience with us. And this will be recorded and made available to anybody.
Thank you.
And for sure, it was very enlightening. We normally, you know, before we say goodbye, we take a picture when we turn off. But we also would like to, Lucielle, would you like to say something? I know that you are there with Miguel, but anyway.
I saw that Miguel.
Oh, Miguel is just awakened here. I have to go and see him. Paola, thank you very much for for this morning. Thank you so much for everything. I have to run here because he's calling me.
Okay,
and
okay.
All best to you and Miguel.
Thank you.
Yeah. But anyway, Paola, thank you very much. So then we normally give our guests some time to say goodbye. So the last words are yours. And then Daniel can conduct the final, you know, the logistics. But thank you very much. It was really nice. We keep learning from our colleagues, from our experience, from different experiences, and then the good thing is to know that we have so many things in common, despite the different contexts. But we are dealing with education. We are dealing with human beings who have and depict the same, let's say, behaviors and dealing with attitude and so many common things to share. But thank you very much. And then I'll leave you, you know, with the final words. And I hope I can see you. We can see you here together with us more often. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. I really feel honored to be part of this community. And I think you're doing a great thing, really, as you said, sharing experiences from different parts of the world and looking at, you know, commonalities. So future project, bring together.
Yeah, sure. Let us know if you engage in any project that you envision our participation. We'll be more than glad to, you know, to cooperate. So Daniel, now it's with you. Thank you very much, Paola.
Thank you.
Grazie mille.
And have a nice weekend, everybody.
Okay,
Thank
now
you.
I'm gonna end the broadcast, but I'm gonna ask to Paola, Jean, Savio, Arnaud, not to leave
Mhm.
Zoom meeting, okay? We're gonna say goodbye
Okay.
to people watching right now
So
or
see
watching
you
later.
next month.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
people.
See you soon. And bye to Kurt too.
Bye, Kurt and the others on the multilingual